Hello everyone and welcome to Our Time. Glad you could join us. We have a couple of very interesting interviews for you in this episode, as we always do, I guess. We're going to be talking about death, demystifying death. It's going to happen to all of us, but I'm having an interesting chat with somebody who will give us some ideas on how we can prepare for our own death. We'll also be talking about living at home, how some of the problems you might be having, and if you're having some problems, how we can make it a bit easier for you. So let's cross to Malcolm for that.
Thank you very much, Sue. It's my great pleasure to welcome to Our Time Mark McBriarty, who's the Managing Director of Home Instead Senior Care. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Malcolm. Great to be here.
How did you get into senior care? You're not that senior.
I started working for Hilton Hotels many years ago and just saw that there was a great need in the senior community for some real quality service standards. So I thought I'd bring a bit of Hilton to aged care.
So what exactly is consumer direct care?
From the 1st of July of this year, it's a model of care that will be implemented across the full 80,000 home care packages that we've got available in Australia. A very fundamental shift. It really started in the 80s and 90s with some trials in disability care where if people gave control to someone to look after their own needs, looking after their own requirements, that they actually became more engaged in the care and were getting better outcomes. So they've brought this across to aged care to say, look, there's a lot more opportunity for people to be able to tailor services to suit exactly their needs rather than a bit of a one-size-fits-all.
So like someone may be able to prepare food for themselves but not repair the gutters.
Well, a good example, we have a number of clients who perhaps might want to put a few hours aside in winter where it might be a bit quieter and bank that for summer, so they might get someone to take them out for 6 or 8 hours on a nice sunny day. So a lot of people who perhaps want to remain in their own home and rather than spend the money on that might want to modify their bathroom to make it safer so that they don't have a fall, which is the leading cause of death for people over 80 is complications from slips, trips and falls.
Is that right?
So the more we can do to make a house safe. So having
the handles and things like that in the bathrooms or at the front door or where there is a step or whatever?
Look, absolutely critical, but what we would suggest is that you have an occupational therapist who comes in and really looks at your capability and where things should go in the house so that you've got those supports where needed.
So how is consumer-directed care different from the traditional home care packages?
As I said, it's really about being able to tailor it to suit your own individual needs. The current model...
So this is the important point, really, isn't it?
It is absolutely critical, this idea of transparency and of choice.
Is it a matter of knowing what you need, though? Is it a matter of giving advice as to what is the best thing to be helped with?
Look, I think there's a broader suite of things and opportunities that can be given to people for them to choose from. At the moment, it's very much about the task, sending someone in to shower you or dress you or wash a floor or cook a meal, rather than really tailoring it down to an individual.
So what are the main concerns? Well, first of all, the recipients of this package are people who are
over the age of 65 and have been assessed as needing care.
I've just fallen into that category.
And as we know, 65 now is a very different kettle of fish to 15 years ago.
Really, 60 is the new 40 sort of thing, so 65 I guess is the new 45.
And quite often we're finding that the needs of clients are really for those in their 80s and 90s, and indeed our oldest client living at home at the moment is 104. And needs a little bit of support with shopping, but other than that, doesn't need us very much at all.
Well, I guess that's a problem too, because as you age, you lose your licence, so you can't do the shopping. Happened to a friend of mine.
Look, the loss of licence is probably the biggest issue that we face with seniors. So being able to not just jump on the community bus, but to go where they want, when they want. Sometimes we're driving Miss Daisy, sometimes they maintain their vehicle and our caregivers will drive it for them, but more often than not, we'll take them where they need to go.
Well, there have been some changes too, haven't there, in legislation federally?
As I say, the big change from July 1st, 2015 is the move towards consumer-directed care, where people will have an individual envelope of money that they'll get to choose to use on services that they provide. So complete transparency of the 4 levels of packages that are out there, so people know how much money they've got to be able to consider, what do I need to stay at home safely?
Okay, so let's just look at a very basic situation here to give an example, because because I guess the hard thing is you think to yourself, what do I need, what don't I need, I suppose. A good friend of mine is fantastic with a whole lot of things looking after himself, but he's not good with heights anymore. And just using the gutters as an example, I know that he's had issues with that. He's also not a handyman around the house, so just screwing a few screws in a fly door, wire door, was a real problem for him. These are the sorts of things.
Absolutely, tailored to your specific needs, and sometimes, some people are very strong in might be able to do all aspects of housekeeping, but mightn't be able to throw a sheet over a bed or hang some washing on a line. So very specific assistance that people themselves decide.
Because of the different things that happen to our body, like you get your shoulders or knees or a problem or whatever.
Absolutely.
So how do we engage
with each individual?
Yeah.
So generally the mechanism is an assessment that's done by the aged care assessment team that looks at your capacity, your capability.
No one should feel embarrassed about that.
Look, it is a big issue. But we call our 80-plus generation at the moment the silent generation. I'll be all right, Jack, and whatever I get, I'll be very, very happy for. When indeed there's a much far greater need out there. There's a lot of people leading quite compromised lives by not getting the support they need to get out. Continence, for example, there's a million Australians that are having difficulty with their bladder, but don't want to talk to anyone about it. It ends up them withdrawing into their home, and then that social interaction reduces. So really important that we have mechanisms that allow us to really understand what people's issues are, so we can then put the necessary supports in.
I understand that. It's interesting. Working in show business, we obviously deal with trying to make people feel good about themselves, and we've just recently in Adelaide here had the Cabaret Festival, which was particularly aimed at perhaps the over 40s in a funny sort of way. The interaction with people going out, seeing something, hearing songs that they're familiar with, or hearing stories that suit their age group. And it's interesting how I know in my age group, and no doubt yours too, we're sort of, the music that we were brought up with in the 50s and 60s is the music we want to hear.
Absolutely.
We want to hear the stories about the people who we idolised, the pop stars and so on, in that vintage. It's interesting because so many of them are still working too, because we can now work much longer.
Absolutely.
And people in our age group are now enjoying reconnecting with them and the people that share our history.
Very much so.
So being able to get out is really important.
Look, there's no doubt that...
So what's an example of, if that was something that I particularly needed to do, just to get out and interact with people my own age, how do I work that out?
So what we would do is have a caregiver sit down with you and go through the Cabaret Festival, have a look at what acts you'd like to see, and we'll take you there. Most of Australia have the companionship card, which allows the carer to be able to go along to most festivals and activities in for free, as long as the individual goes along. And powerful connection is music, particularly with people with dementia who may lose their ability to be able to communicate verbally, but you see the right song come on and you see the lights.
Yes, absolutely right.
It's an amazing, powerful tool.
But obviously it's more than that. It's simple things like even, I guess, just going to the doctor or the shopping, as you've already said. So what other things do we need to know about that will help us engage?
Look, it really is about being honest with yourself and your capacity. We really encourage families to sit down and not wait for a crisis, but to sit down and talk about, don't harangue your parents about what help they need, but make suggestions. Give some things a try with them to see where their capacities are. But we really recommend that they go through the ACAT assessment. So that's normally a social worker who will come out, or a nurse will come out and really look at your capacity and capability to live independently and make some very useful suggestions on what help you might need to get there.
And don't be afraid to be honest about that either, because that's obviously the most important part of it.
We find it a lot with dementia that people can really focus for half an hour, 45 minutes, and that tends to coincide when they're being assessed and the rest of the family are going, you're not seeing the other 23 hours of the day. So it really is about being...
And don't put on a pretense act that I'm okay, I'm fine.
I'm all right, Jack, I'll be fine.
I'll be up on the roof tomorrow fixing the leak. I'll be cleaning out the gutters next week.
Look, from a capacity point of view, it is cheaper for our society to keep people fit and well rather than have them landing into hospital and coming back out and landing back in again. So,
and for the individual too, to be in familiar surroundings where home is home.
No question.
I was just going to ask you, basically, as we are ageing and we're more capable of doing things for ourselves, is it really the fact that it's just our embarrassment to ask for help? Is this part of, like, we expect, I suppose, our kids to do stuff for us, and these days they honestly can't? Is it men or women who have the most resistance to asking for help?
Look, definitely men. There's no question of that. Particularly the silent generation, the men in their 70s and 80s, who are always the robust breadwinner and self-sufficient person in the family. If they're having difficulties and issues, generally their GP is the last person to learn about it, and that needs to change.
Because they don't ask the right questions. It's interesting, and of all the people we've had on this program, we've had talking about our eye care or our general health, it's interesting how most of us are not prepared to admit, I need help.
And look, sometimes it's just a lack of insight. We're still 20 on the inside and we don't notice sometimes the issues. And it really, and a family bring it up, we don't tend to regard it. And we find with our caregivers that clients will open up and tell them things that they won't tell their GP because they've gotten old with them. They won't tell family members. So once we understand what the issues are, we're in an awfully good position then to offer some suggestions for them. And again, leaving them with choice and decision. And that's certainly a very important part of any aged care framework. You know, if someone's got dementia, you can still give them the choice of things to do.
So the government did announce these changes that are going to come into effect in
July 1st, yes. Oh no, sorry, there's some further changes
some more changes
in 2017 which were announced in the last budget, and that really is a huge change across to individual funding. So rather than the money going to a not-for-profit provider, it will go to the individual. And
so you can choose what you need to, as you said at the
and
beginning.
using your own packet of money. For example, a level 4 package is worth $48,000. Currently, through an aged care provider, you might get 12 hours of care. If you were to have that budget yourself and not require anything other than services of people coming into your home day and night, if you were to use a private provider, you'd probably be looking at about 20 hours. So there is some wastage in the system there. There are some overheads that the not-for-profit organisations have in tendering for contracts, etc. So all of this money is not money that's helping someone stay independent. So the government has said, enough of this, let's put the money where it belongs, which is in the client's hand.
Yes, exactly.
And they may choose to have a satellite of their language from their country where they came from. Quite a few people with dementia, for example, revert to native language.
That makes sense, yes.
So using funds that will enable people to continue to live and enjoy themselves is really the fundamental basis of this full model.
Mark, that's just great information. We hope you can access that for yourself. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Mark, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Malcolm.
You know, they say in life that the only things that we can truly be certain about are taxes and death. And I think we sometimes neglect to think about what's going to happen at the end of our lives. And regrettably, many people don't think about death and dying and what will happen when they do die. They tend to think, oh, let everybody else think about it or do it for us. But, you know, it's a good idea to think about those things. And to that end, we have Mr. Robert Pitt, who is the CEO of the Adelaide Cemeteries Authority, to chat with us today to talk about how people can actually prepare for their death and help their families in the same process. Thank you for coming in, Robert. Lovely to meet you. How is it becoming more of a trend now that people are preparing for funerals and preparing for their own death, or is it something that's still frowned upon? People still have that taboo feeling?
I'm not sure it's what you would class as a trend yet, Sue. If you think about the age of our community, or age around Australia, currently there's about 150,000 deaths a year in Australia. It's forecast to increase to 250,000 over the next 20-25 years. So I think it's something more and more people are going to have to be thinking about. And part of what we do at Adelaide Cemeteries Authority is to try to encourage people to think about that ahead of time, not when the time comes.
Yeah. And it would clearly make it a lot easier for the families too if they do so.
I think that's two parts to it. One, the family, and certainly the person concerned. We've been doing some work and interviewing people and talking about their own preferences and thinking around their own death. And we've sort of identified two groups. One's an active acceptors and the others are what we call passive rejectors. And it's really about people who are happy and comfortable with the sense that they are mortal and at some stage they're going to die. And there's other people who really haven't come to terms with that yet. So it's an interesting, different thinking.
As I mentioned to you before, part of some of the work I do is as a funeral celebrant, so just presenting funerals for people and helping them put it together. And some of the people that I've come in contact with, and when I've talked to them about, have you thought about death and dying? Oh no, who would want to do a funeral for me? Do you wonder sometimes whether it's a lot to do with the personality of person, whether it's that self-effacing thing or that putting down, I'm not worthy, why would anyone want to celebrate my life? What have I done? What have I achieved? Have you come across that kind of attitude? I
think there's an element of that, certainly amongst men. Again, the work we've done, a lot of men, older men, tend not to be too fussed.
Oh no, older men, just throw me over the boat, I'll be right.
That's pretty well exactly the message we get.
Dig a hole,
It doesn't matter, I'm not here anymore.
No. Which is a shame because, and I think this is what I try to talk to people about, and I know this is the sort of work that you're doing and it's happening right around Australia, is we're trying to say to people, everybody's life is of value. No matter, you might have only been a person who never worked, but you were at home, like from a woman's perspective. You were the homemaker. But whatever you did is worth paying tribute to and honouring, and that's what it's all about. Giving people the opportunity to say, this was my mum, she made the best roast dinners or she cooked the best chocolate cake, whatever it was, that it's the memories that people have that we're looking at perpetuating.
I think you're right. Certainly the cemeteries, which we see as a place to remember, are very much about that. There's some interesting work in America at the moment about the rise in grief counselling with people who haven't chosen to have a memorial or a headstone. And certainly I think also that interest in genealogy, and we get about 6,000 visits to our website, and the majority each month, and most of those are people looking and trying to trace relatives and find out more about their families and those memories as well.
Do you find more and more, less people are having burials now where they actually have a headstone and the body is buried? There seem to be more cremations. How are people going about remembering their loved ones or having a separate spot for them?
I think there's still a very strong, certainly ethnic and cultural and religious groups who are committed to burials and still require that, ranging from mausolea to earth burials with your headstones, and even now, of course, natural burials we offer are infield. That's where you're buried, no preservatives, and in a wooden coffin with rope handles, and you're buried, and basically the ground is filled over with a microchip in each corner, and then a tree is planted 6 months afterwards, and for all intents and purposes, you go back to earth naturally. That's a natural or green burial.
So what do the microchips do? What is the...
Well, we still mark the burial. We still know where you're buried. So at the corner of the coffin after we've interred, you can go with a scanner and we can know that someone is still buried there. That's where the coffin was,
and that's where you plant the tree. That's a lovely concept. So how does that differ from a normal coffin?
Normal coffin, quite often there's some embalming done, which is done with non-biodegradable fluids. Some coffins are lined with either plastic or some other materials, which again are artificial fibres. And the other point is, I think, is that the other coffins may be finished with a particularly shiny lacquer, which again is a petro-based chemical and not necessarily biodegradable or easily broken down.
Is that right? Well, I've learned something new there. I had no idea about that.
But I think you're right. Your point's a good one there too. The other thing we found by looking into the issue and speaking to people is that more and more people want a far more unique or personalised experience. I think you may have come across this yourself too. They really want to actually bring some of their own personality to the actual service.
Ceremony.
And the ceremony. And even to the monument memorial.
Yes.
And it could be either the type or the style or even the location where it happens.
Well, I've done some funerals in vineyards or in beach locations, things like that, where people have said, look, the beach was my passion, or this particular man was a winemaker, had a beautiful property with olive groves and vines, and he wanted the ceremony done there, and his ashes will be taken back there. But I think I sort of feel it's significant to have a tree or something where the descendants can go and say, hey, this is where the remains of my loved one is, one of my relatives.
So I think the real joy, one of the joys of my work, if I could call it that, is coming into work after Mother's Day and Father's Day. And Enfield, which is one of the 4 cemeteries we manage and care for, literally on the Monday after Mother's Day and Father's Day, there's just a sea of wonderful flowers.
Yes.
And I think it reminds you of why we're there and what we offer to families and loved ones.
I think it's a very important thing. And I have to admit, as a celebrant myself, I've written my own funeral because I love, we often use in a ceremony now a DVD of photos, a photo presentation, and to encapsulate the person's life. And it helps me when I see it. I see the little baby born, you know, with the old grandma and grandpa or whatever, and the little girl goes off to school and she becomes older and she marries. There she is with her first baby, and it progresses through until she's a little old lady at 90, hopefully. And somehow or other, when that person goes at that age, you think, well, the journey's been travelled. You know, it's okay. And it's a lovely way to remember the whole thing. But I decided if I'm going to have this done, I want to choose the photos myself. And I've done that. But I also ask people, and I think it's a good thing for people to know at home, to talk to their elderly parents and to talk about the things that they might like. Are you finding that people are doing that more and more now, that families are talking to and coming to you and saying, look, Mum wanted this, Dad wanted this, that they actually know?
Oh, it's very much the case. Certainly, particularly in terms of music and songs. I think the old days of the half-hour service with Abide With Me in the Lord's Prayer, we still do those, but they're becoming less and less, and people are choosing particular songs of their life. And it can even be the food or the drink that's offered at the service. We've had people bring their dogs to funeral services and even have live music and those sorts of different things that people are after. But certainly what we're providing now is some information to families, and most funeral directors do it as well, as I think you've touched on, is to encourage people to think ahead, plan ahead, and it just relieves some of the burden and some of the discussions on the family at the time when they're perhaps not thinking as clearly and quite emotional at the time.
I think if people realise that it puts an enormous burden on those they leave behind. For one thing, you lose your mum or your dad, or heaven forbid your child, and you're grieving. And then you have to make all these decisions about what mum might or might not like. And if the person who dies has actually left some notes to say, look, this is what I would like, this is some of the music that I would like, or these are some of the photos that I would like. I'd like this done, I'd like a lady celebrant or a male celebrant. It just makes it so much easier for the people left behind.
Yes, and I think it's a really important gesture too. Particularly if, you know, generally you're organising the family of a close, the funeral of a family close family member, and it's just a wonderful gesture and a really important thing that you do as part of being part of a family. Yes,
I just think it takes the burden off the family too. That they'll say to me, we're so grateful, Mum. We found this book that Mum had put everything in that she'd like. She'd even picked out her coffin, or she particularly wanted these sorts of flowers. And I really like, as a celebrant, to be able to say, we are now going to all stand together and sing this particular hymn. It was something that Mary, or whoever the person is, Mary requested, and she would like you all to sing it in full voice. And it's nice for people to think, oh, we're doing this for the lady who's gone, to all do it together. So it's good to put those sorts of things down. So this is a campaign that you're running now, encouraging people. You're trying to, in a sense, demystify the whole thing about death. I mean, we're all going sometime, aren't we?
We are.
We have to recognise it.
We
and I
all
think
do.
The sooner we recognise it and then decide, look, let's make some plans, let's do some things and help our families out at the same time, it's a wonderful thing. Thank you so much for coming in. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and we hope that you at home have had some information that may just start you thinking, or it may encourage you to talk to somebody who is perhaps dying with a terminal illness, or somebody who is elderly and you know that they maybe only have a few more years. Have a chat with them. Thanks again for coming in, Robert.
Thank you, Sue.
Malcolm, what are you doing?
I'm preparing for death. I just thought I'd straighten myself out.
I seriously think he's missed the whole point. The whole point was not, you know, you're not dying yet, but you need to think about. You've already got your piece of land. Yeah, but you don't have to do it like that. Not yet. Still
Oh,
ready
okay.
for that.
I'm glad of that.
And
It's actually, when you plan for it in advance, it's actually not that scary.
much easier that way. See
And
you
people
next
know
time.
what you want. Oh, until next time we see you, keep yourself nice. Till then, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome. Bye-bye for now.